I've not been here for weeks now, and it's really, really good. It feels like homecoming. Today feels like homecoming in a lot of ways for this church. It's rally day. I'm not sure if you noticed the inflatables and the balloon guy. You always know it's a church festival when Balloon Dude is here. And that is the name of his LLC, by the way. Balloon Dude Incorporated. Right? It's great. It's a great day in the life of the church. It's rally day. It's also a day for us to go in and sign the walls of that new preschool building that it's gonna hold thousands of kids over the next several generations and hold them in our prayers. So it feels like homecoming. It feels like homecoming up here for one extra reason. There's all this other stuff going on in the life of the church. I'm not sure if those of you who've been around will recognize that on Rally Day in 2008, that's when this building opened. Do you know that? This is the 10-year anniversary. It probably actually happened in September that year, but it was Rally Day, and Rally Day for us is this year now. It's the first time we had parish breakfast in the new parish hall. It's the first time this space was open for worship together. It's the first time that Chef Vanessa was here, and her ministry has been not only to feed folks on breakfast, but also on Wednesday nights. We've had men's Bible study that started cooking breakfast out of that same kitchen, and so on and so forth. It draws me to this point that there have been so many people who have been fed here, but just by looking at what this building contains today, there have been those who have been fed here literally, and those who have been fed here spiritually, and how often we have been both of those, right? We are now in week 5 or 6 or some ungodly number of weeks of going on and on and on about bread from Jesus. If you have been here, you will have heard sermons on bread every week since the beginning of August. You got one more coming your way. It's not really going to be about bread. If we're still talking about bread, we've missed the last several weeks. Jesus stopped talking about bread a while ago and instead started using bread to look at a deeper thing about how we are fed, how we consume that gift of life that Christ is, and how we embody it as a result, how we become what we eat, so to speak, right? If we're talking about breakfast downstairs and all we're talking about is bacon and eggs, we're missing what's really happening down there. We're talking about this building, and we're talking about how many people have been fed here, and we don't understand that it's been thousands upon thousands of people who have been fed by this community and by our prayers, fed by the grace that is contained here, then we've missed what Jesus has actually been doing here, right? So much more than a building, so much more than a collection of words. It's life for us. I've experienced that in so many ways, sometimes well in my life and sometimes not so well, as it is with spiritual things, right? Sometimes you kind of move into it like the incoming tide, and then every now and then, like you are the tide pool that's left that starts to smell a little fishy. I've been both of those, right? When I have truly been able to see, as Jesus says, right, those who believe and can see, they really understand what he's saying, and those who don't are still talking about bread. When I can really see, I start to understand there's so much more about life than just the life that I thought I was living, and there's so much more about the grace that is filling up the world around me than meets the eye. If I believe, I begin to see. If I start to step back a little bit, I can really see what God's up to. That's a life-changing experience. It's a perspective-changing experience, right? It ought to be. And that's what Jesus is inviting people to experience in this gospel, is that perspective change that just suddenly shifts everything in your life. Your life isn't just life anymore. If you had gone to maybe a downstairs service last week or to Canuga a couple weeks ago, you would have heard me already preach that sermon, so I won't do it again today. That Jesus uses a word for life here that cannot be confused with just that thing that you are or do from the moment you're born to the moment you die. Jesus uses another word, zoe in Greek, that extends from God, the force of life that was God's at the beginning and has come and saturated this created universe that God called good and will extend way beyond your biological life's end. I know that's a confusing kind of thing because in English we only have the one word life, right? So just for extra, Jesus adds eternal life, forever life. Not just because chronologically it will extend beyond your death, but because it's always been God's. That's the life that he offers. It's the life that he wants us to consume and hold in us and act out of. And if we are willing to take that in and give that back out, then we suddenly see that the world around us isn't what we thought it was. And everything changes. How we treat our friends and family, it changes. How we retreat the decisions we make in our life. Those decisions will change if at the end of that decision-making process is eternal life versus just the life I'm trying to live for myself before I die, right? It's my belief that at this church, this is a visible symbol of people who have understood and seen and believed that life isn't just what happens between our birth and our death, that the decisions we make can manifest our understanding that life is so much more, both now and after we die. So they had the courage 67 years ago to build a little cinder block building down there. Those cinder blocks are still there, of course, and begin to worship here. They had the courage in 1952. I'm not sure if maybe you already walked down past the timeline, so I'll be brief. It's downstairs. 1952 to start raising money to build a preschool because they knew that there was an opportunity to shape lives beyond what could be shaped without housing our children and providing them our prayer and providing to them our spiritual gifts. And this building, as we've already said, contains that same hope. Since 2008, between 150 and 300 people have worshiped up here on Sundays. Think of the way that that expresses real life, not just biological life. How many people in our midst have come and gone? How many have been born and baptized here or have died from this parish? But life is more than that. For me, I've experienced that here, and so I'll use myself as a very brief example. I have had the great pleasure of, first of all, ministering here and being surrounded by an incredible community of saints. And you are saints. You've strengthened me. You've given me support. You've prayed for me when I have been the tide pool. You've loved, and I've seen you love each other in ways that are phenomenal. And I see you trying and striving to continue to do it as life continues to fold out beyond your horizon. And you can see more and more the opportunities that are coming from God to you to love and share grace. Our kids have gone to preschool here. One of them is now a kindergartner and isn't at this school anymore. It's a crisis in my life. The other one will start on Tuesday when preschool starts back. To watch my own children held by love and prayer in the hands of a community of faith is one of the greatest gifts a parent can ever have. Right? One that extends beyond geography and beyond time. It's eternal. It's real life. Right? It exists in a sort of age that's timeless. And truly, that's what Jesus is talking about when he talks about eternal life. It's another one of those words that if you could go back and see it in Greek, it would make so much more sense. Jesus says that there is a life that is filled with scarcity and pain and suffering, and that's not the life that's true. It's not the age that's true. It's just the age that we've lived in ever since what we would call the fall. I'm not a big fan of that theologically, but it pinpoints it for you, right? The time that human arrogance and pride began to have dominion in our lives, that sin became our choice, that we exchanged God's rule for our own rule. From that point on, we've lived in an age that's characterized by the consequences as well as by our decisions to live under the dominion of sin. But what Jesus says is that as he comes into the world, he is the beginning of a new age. In fact, if you go back and you read from the first chapter of John, it lays this out so well, right? It talks about the beginning, and then it sets up for you what's been inaugurated. I'll put that on the screen real quick so you can take a look at it. I know you know these words. Oh, no. Not that. That. Thank you. In the beginning was the Word, right? The creative force of God that will cause the entire universe to even come into being. The Word was with God. The Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him, not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, Zoe. And the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness and chaos does not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John, and he came as a witness to testify to the light so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, the Word, yet the world did not know him. Came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave the power to become children of God, who were born not of blood or of the will of the flesh or of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, filled with grace and truth. That Word that was life and light and entered into this world that no darkness could possibly overcome it, has put on flesh and dwelt among us. In other words, the old age doesn't have dominion over the person of Christ or over any of the life that will come to be his own. I'm a hand talker. Y'all know that about me. If you didn't, you do now. For me, it's so much easier to see this. You have a life filled with the characteristics of the passing away age, suffering. We'll just call it suffering and pain and death right now. We've experienced that. We know what that is. It's not forever, but it has characterized our life for ages. But when Christ becomes flesh and dwells among us, a new age begins. And Christ promises us that it's not like we have to wait for this age to end and this life to begin as if they are butted up next to each other as some sort of chronological unfolding, and one has to end in order for the next one to begin. They overlap each other. The new age is right now. The ability to live as if life is more than just biology is right now. The ability to live as if death has no dominion, but instead grace and truth and peace and forgiveness and love have all of the meaning that you'll ever need in your life. That's right now. It's the bread that can sustain you, not for the life that's passing away, but for the life that God says is forever. It's the thing that you can draw into your life so closely that it's like food for your soul. But it becomes a part of you. You abide in it, and you abide from it. Because it's not just about you, it's about everyone else too. As the old age passes away, everything becomes about all of us. There's nothing to divide us anymore, because that bond of unity that comes from God's love is complete. Jesus doesn't ask us to wait patiently with hope as if one day, maybe, if we're lucky, the next age will start. Jesus asks us to start living today as if it's already here. That is what characterizes the decisions that were made before I was ever here and long after I'll ever be here that make this church a real church. Anything less than that is just what we do as an institution, but that's what makes us a church. It's what will make us a church in the future. It's what allows us to understand the buildings that we're in as vessels of grace instead of just capital expenses. It's what allows us to do our work in our ministry. I want to tell you one more story as briefly as I can, It's related to this stuff about buildings. There are many folks in this parish who are approaching or have exceeded the 100-year mark. And there's one more that's on her way there. She's 97. She'll turn 98 this year. And she called in the other day to make a pledge to the capital campaign. So understand either the optimism or the audacity of that, right? She's making a pledge intended to be fulfilled over the next 3 to 5 years. She's 97 years old, turning 98, to build a building that's not going to be here for a while. She was quite aware of that. And she talked about the grace that she's received by those who were courageous enough to do that before her. How they made choices in their life that would allow her to have life in the way that God intended for her to have life. And that she wanted to do the same. That she knew that her life, biologically speaking, would end one day. Who knows when? But that every decision that she made with her family, with her understanding of what her ministry was, and with her finances, could say that she believed that her life doesn't end when her heart stops beating, because no real life does. Real life is a gift that came from God before you were born and will be God's gift to you after. You know, God's great gift of love and life is something that you can experience now in a way that will last forever. And in a way that can change the way you inhabit this world. That is a citizen not of a kingdom that's passing away or an age that's passing away, but as both an agent and a recipient of a life that will never end. I pray just as much, and I ask you to pray that I may experience the grace that opens my eyes to see that I can live in that kingdom now, and to make every one of my decisions in my life be a symbol that says, I truly believe in the life that I consume, in the life that I bring to others, and the age to come, the age that is now. Amen.